This video is part 2 of my Trails in the Sky Trilogy video. I'm releasing this standalone for now so you can experience parts of it in a timely manner, as this is part of a huge project. If you want to support me, I have a KoFi where you can see artwork I've done as well as gain access to videos like this a whole week early if you're a supporter. It's basically like Patreon, but I get paid much faster, and it has an easy to understand art commission system. Anyway, that's enough plugging, let's begin. Trails in the Sky second chapter is one of my favorite games of all time. This was a sentiment I felt back when I first played the game back in 2019, and I still do. After a abrupt ending to the first game, I was absolutely ecstatic to see what was next, especially after the first game managed to completely win me over. However, now that I have played every Trails game after this with tons of quality of life changes, presentation improvements, and a plethora of other things this game will be competing with, does this game hold up as one of my favorites? Well, let's jump in. Now before we continue, this game is a direct sequel to Trails in the Sky first chapter, and therefore the visuals could possibly spoil you to playable characters or events that happened in that game. If you want to totally avoid spoilers, especially if you are currently playing the first game, I will avoid saying as much as I can, but I do want to share my thoughts. If you need to, go play the games and come back and this video will still be here. Anyway, let's talk about the most beloved game in the Trails series, Trails in the Sky, second chapter. Trails in the Sky first chapter and second chapter were originally meant to be one game, but it was getting to be a bit too long, so they had to split it into two. If you have clear data from Trails in the Sky first chapter, you get a lot of neat bonuses depending on what you did. Your levels carry over, some NPCs will remember you and give you items for completing their quests in first chapter, and it really helps hammer in the feeling of these two being one big adventure, with the continuity really adding to the immersion. Now, if you are a fan of Golden Sun like me, all of this will sound pretty familiar, including the whole game split, which is fun. Though unlike Golden Sun, this doesn't transfer items, quartz, and equipment, though nonetheless, I love this sort of stuff obviously, and having it in the game at all is just really fun. They do have a justification for the quartz though, and it happens every game, which is amusing. Basically, every sequel character's ornaments upgrade to a new type, and therefore they can't use the old quartz. It's like in Kingdom Hearts where plot stuff made Sora just lose all of his stuff. It is fun that they acknowledge it though, but nonetheless, it kinda sucks to see in a way. Now, something I need to address, obviously, is that this series is not one where the sequels work as a standalone experience. I think if you played this without playing FC, you'd be pretty confused and missing a lot of necessary context. There was an OVA that is available on Hulu for some reason that is actually an adaptation of this game by itself, and it goes through so many of the plot beats in a way that really doesn't do it justice. If you see anime footage, that's where it came from. Now, there is a lot I could talk about because this game is a chunky one, so like last time, I am going to briefly talk about the premise. This will require me to somewhat spoil the first game, so skip this timestamp right here. I'm gonna have a few of these timestamps in this, so stay alert. Anyway, let's go ahead and do this. So at the end of FC, we saw Estelle and Joshua go their separate ways in a pretty dramatic scene, as the Society of Ouroboros was also revealed at the end of that game, working to cause chaos in Liberl. As an aside, this exchange at the end of FC honestly broke me for real, and I was crying so much, man, when I finished this game. It was insane. This game picks up immediately after that scene as Estelle prepares to look for and stop the Society of Ouroboros, the new villains of this game. Second chapter is quite a meaty game compared to the first game. Where FC could be finished under 60 hours, SC, if you know what you were doing, clocks in at around 72 in-game hours, though my original playthrough took me around 90 hours. If I hadn't played Three Houses prior to playing these, this would have been the longest RPG I had played up to this point. There's a lot of story and a lot of reading just like last time. Now, while there is a lot of reading, I love the story of this game. There were lots of loose ends from the end of the last game, and I'm very glad to say that this game deals with all of them, while keeping what setups it has for later games subtle. I can say this right now, the story is probably the single best part of the Trails series for many, and I think Trails in the Sky FC and SC have the most well-crafted narrative of the series. SC is much darker than the first, but not oppressively so. Things have escalated, and while you are going to the same places, the pacing is much tighter. The quests are much more consistently paced, and in general, this game moves much faster than the original. Sky SC is once again set in the land of Liberl, which means you will be exploring a lot of the same places again. But the game overall is a bit less willing to waste your time, and unlike last game, you actually keep your party members for the most part chapter to chapter, which really improved the gameplay, but I'll talk about that in a bit. In this game, we are now faced with a new group of villains, the Society of Ouroboros. Think of your usual anime villain organization, the Akatsuki from Naruto, Organization 13 from Kingdom Hearts, etc. Something the first chapter never really had in its narrative but didn't really need was a rival antagonistic force. However, the Ouroboros aren't just a bunch of cool villains with powers, but they are also really well developed characters that actually forward the development of many of the characters in our party. If you love the cast from first chapter, they get even more development this time around, with Shara, Tita, Agate, Zin, and Olivier all getting characters to bounce off of, and by the end of the game, if any character didn't win you over in FC, I think SC has a good chance to completely steal your heart. I love this cast with all of my heart, and I don't feel this way about most JRPG casts. As for Estelle, she is given the singular spotlight in this game, and you really get a sense that she has really grown as a character after the events in the first game. While she keeps her spunky personality, with this game having most of her best lines, she also seems more mature in how she approaches situations. She is probably the best protagonist I have followed in any RPG at this point. Maybe someone will disagree with me though, but hey, I don't care. There are also a few other characters I want to mention. First is the new character Kevin Graham, who immediately reminded me of Vash from Trigun when I met him, as well as Annalise, who was in the last game but actually becomes playable in short sections of this game. Kevin is a traveling priest that we meet in the opening hours of this game, featuring a goofy and aloof personality, often hitting on Estelle, which may or may not be serious, I don't know, it's kinda hard to read this guy sometimes. He is really nice though, and he gets a lot of focus in the next game, while having tons of great moments in this one. Annalise is a bracer girl that loves all things cute and is a practitioner of the 8 laves, 1 blade sword style that gets a lot more attention in later games. She's a cute character herself, again though she isn't playable for very long, as most of that is in the prologue of this game. As for the Ouroboros members themselves, I also love them. Though this is also the game where many of them were introduced, which means they have a bit less time to develop than the core cast, but man, they leave such an impression with probably the greatest villain theme song I have ever heard. There's also the main villain, which I'm choosing to keep anonymous for now, but is probably the most despicable, disgusting, manipulative, evil, conniving, snake-like, psychopathic, soulless character I have ever experienced in a while. Honestly, very entertaining. Now I'm going to talk about some spoilery things for this game before I jump into the gameplay section, so please use this timestamp right here to skip this. Sorry to use another one, but I want to throw a bone for people who have played this before, so let's gush about some of the new characters. Ren is a very fascinating character for reasons I won't go into in this video, but when I first met her, I knew she had a Nendo which told me she had to be important. She starts off seeming like a normal girl, only for you to find out she definitely isn't. The directions they take this character are pretty great, especially revisiting the game. She's a testament to how many things this game subtly sets up, and you'd have no idea until later. Another character is Louve, with a name I've heard pronounced multiple ways. I've played this game subbed, so I'll be going with Louve, but apparently when he's mentioned in later games in dub, it's Luwe? Anyway, this character is sort of the Camus or Camus, which is really funny, of Ouroboros in a sense if you're familiar with Fire Emblem archetypes. He has a really dark past, and while not as interesting as some other characters, I understand where he's coming from and he remains loyal to their group. Then there's my man Joshua, who has been through some really awful things. And in this game you can really see him as a former broken man driven by resolve. They do some really cool stuff with him, with one section of the game basically making him the coolest character ever. It's a bit anime, but man, I love it, and you'll definitely be seeing more stuff like that in this franchise. franchise. Also, there's the Kapua Sky Pirates, who were introduced in the last game and get a much more major role in this game. They are also there to help out Joshua, which is a dynamic I did not expect, but I like it a lot. You also learn much more about them, and I know several people who hate Josette as it created this weird love triangle dynamic, but I think she's cool, though I definitely understand the hate. Legit, I don't say this lightly, but this game's story was an emotional roller coaster. I think looking back to when I played it back in 2019, I cried multiple times, and I'm not one who normally does that when I play games, so this is to let you know that it really did emotionally affect me, and I think it was something I really needed at the time, and I think it is a really, really good plot, and the characters are great, and just seeing them develop is fantastic. I just love the story of this game. If you play RPGs for their stories, then the first two Sky games are a must-play, and masters of world building. There's so much I could gush about, but I'm going to put a lid on this for now and get back to the gameplay. So in the original version of my script, I didn't have that much to say about the combat, but after replaying the game, boy, I am about to gush. But first, before I indulge myself with that, let's talk about the exploration in this one for a bit. You are still running around doing Bracer Go quests for NPCs in this game, and the game loop from last time is pretty much intact. You arrive in an area, there are quests on the board, do around 8 quests per chapter, repeat. Now, a weird quirk of the quests in this game is there are usually quests available at the start of chapters this time, giving you a little more to do in previous areas before you move on. Now, compared to FC, the pacing for this game is much tighter, with the plot progressing relatively fast in each region until you get to the second half, where things really kick into gear. Now, there was a moment in first chapter where you had to fish for an achievement, however, this is a game that properly introduces fishing as a mainstay side activity in the Trails series. Every single game after this features fishing of some kind. It's kind of a meme these days that every RPG has to have fishing, but hey, Trails did it pretty early. Now, fishing in the early Trails games is kind of a matter of trial and error. It's more about choosing the right rod and bait, and then using smaller fish you've caught to catch the bigger fish. The important thing is to watch for that exclamation mark and smack the confirm button. Or at least that's what I would say if the timing weren't so strict in this game. Sometimes the window for it is so narrow that your brain doesn't exactly process to press the button in time. So in actuality, I started actually looking at the rod itself and noticed when it bobbed, and then I would press the button. Now, I want to revisit this point I'm about to make when I get to Crossbell, but I believe those games made this a bit more generous. Unlike later games, this is only really required for one small quest, it's fairly unobtrusive, and by the time I played Azure, I weirdly had fun with this side activity. God, I just admitted I liked fishing in a video game. What am I doing with my life? Okay, now for combat. Back in 2019, I personally found this game's difficulty to be much higher than the first game, meaning it kicked my butt. This game can be really difficult if you don't have a full grasp on how to use your tools, but since you could just hit retry just like last game when you lose fights, it felt like I could get away with it, being honest. Now, on my newest playthrough, I had basically the opposite experience with this game than I did with first chapter, or even my first playthrough of this game, but let's go ahead and talk about the combat, starting with what's the same. Now, I should mention something important. This time around I played on normal as opposed to hard, but even with that, I was shocked how much this game was actually balanced like the later games. I was ready to say art's good, crafts suck just like last time, but after playing this, I found out you can really break this game in two with the right combinations. SC's combat is exactly the same as FC, though your pool of arts and crafts are largely expanded. This is because of two reasons. One, your ornaments from the last game have been expanded at the cost of losing all your quartz from the first game, but in exchange you can unlock slots fairly easily in this game, with the only difference being that you now have secondary slots. Now, this allows you to get spells from the first game fairly easily, while the second slots give you more spells to learn. Crafts are incredible in this game, but this is partly because you start this game with every craft you had at the end of the last game, meaning your arsenal to work with is immediately much larger from the get-go. Additionally, over the course of the game, you'll learn new crafts, upgrades to previous crafts, and brand new S-crafts. Now, one brand new addition is the Chain Attack craft. Using this, everyone in the game is able to spend CP to do team attacks with your allies. When I first played this game like an idiot, I wrote off this skill since it burned out a lot of my character's turns. However, on this replay, it's an incredible addition that really busts open some fights. I was dumb. Later games definitely have their own variations of this mechanic, but this is probably its most busted incarnation. It costs very little to activate, and when paired with good equipment, you can really shred some enemies with it when timed on a crit turn. Alright, so let's back this up and talk about what is easily my favorite improvement to the gameplay. You have full control of your party. This game doesn't do the in and out shenanigans that the first game did for most of its runtime. This also means almost every scene in this game has tons of varying dialogue with a very interesting choice early on. At the start of Chapter 1, you were given the choice of Agate and Shara to follow you on your journey through Liberl. They actually stick around for several chapters, and that alone affects a lot of story moments and adds replay value. Now, when I first played this game, I remember this one being really difficult on normal. The challenge has definitely escalated in comparison to first chapter, but on the flip side, the game really rewards you with some good stuff for doing quests. You can go really crazy with your party building in this game compared to before. Agate is the heavy one, doing crazy damage and featuring a big risk-reward skill where he sacrifices HP to get massive amounts of CP. Shara, on the other hand, has a skill that applies AT Advance, or Accelerate as it's known in later games, to several of your party members. This skill is wild because if you plan it out, you can get lots of turns off on enemies. Both of these characters are very busted, and there are some crazy applications to everyone. I spent so much time in this game messing with equipment, quartz loadouts, and just trying to break the game as much as I could. I gave Tina Deathblow 1 for example for a good chunk of the game, which is fun because Deathblow 1 basically has a random chance to kill enemies, and because of her attacks having an AoE effect, it was sometimes fun seeing an enemy and a mob just get destroyed like BAM! A lot of the S-crafts in this are also really cool looking and a marked improvement over the first game. The amount of crazy stuff you can do with this game was incredibly fun on a revisit. Ultimately, I think the biggest praise I can give the combat is that while mechanically it is unchanged, this is a case of how you use those tools. The balance for this game is much more my thing, there's a lot of strategy, and the quartz system is so flexible you can do a lot of crazy things in this compared to last time. In general, this was really fun. Alright, now we get to talk about the soundtrack. Man, the music in this game is good. Now, when I first played this, I wasn't a fan of the regular battle and boss themes as it took a long time for the jazzy style to really grow on me, but revisiting this game, the music in this is absolutely some of my favorite stuff to come out of Trails. Now, a good chunk of the original soundtrack from first chapter returns in this game and complements all of the areas very well, but the new songs in this really complement the more serious tone of this game. They added Takahiro Unasuga to the soundtrack of this game, and he is my personal favorite Falcom composer. I have more to say about him in Crossbell and especially Cold Steel, but he made a very good entrance in this game, getting to do this game's battle theme. Also continuing the jazzy feel is the regular boss theme created by the late and great Wataru Ishibashi. But also as a taste of how there is more of an edge to this OST, here's one of my favorite battle themes in this one, Fate of the Fairies. A lot of the music from this game would go on to become some of the most iconic music in the entire Trails series. Silver Will from the first game is basically the theme song of this game, with its leitmotif playing several times over the course of the game, most notably getting a vocal version of it as this game's opening. The soundtrack for second chapter is easily one of my favorites in the whole series, and it is so well done, and easily one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. Alright, so I've done nothing but praise this game so far, and you're probably thinking there has to be an issue with this game, right? Well, yes, there is. Actually a few. Though they are largely issues I had with the first game, but kinda amplified. Without going into too much detail, Chapter 8 was probably my least favorite part of this game. There was a lot of really cool stuff about it, but it's where this series' lack of fast travel really started to become an issue for me. I don't want to say much more than that though, I'll just say there was a lot of back and forth, and I imagine without Turbo I'd probably get really frustrated with the chapter. Another smaller issue is the dungeons. I'm not the biggest fan of the dungeons in the Sky games, to be brutally honest with you. The camera makes it really easy to be disoriented after you finish a fight, and the lack of a minimap doesn't help things. Now, they are largely inoffensive, and I imagine most RPG fans won't care much about that, but just coming off the excellently designed dungeons in Golden Sun, I feel I can go ahead and point this out. A unique issue to this game is the actual process of swapping characters. This is probably the least offensive issue, but I found it kind of tiring in the final chapter in particular. Basically, in order to swap characters, you had to manually return to the guild to be able to swap. Now, yes, this makes sense in regards to realism or whatever, but man, it is not convenient whatsoever. Add on to this that the cast gets pretty large by the end, and maybe you want to bring some characters to different fights, that means you gotta backtrack. Also, unlike last game where the characters tag out between chapters and unequip their stuff, this does not happen in SC. If you need some equipment, you'll need to figure out who has it, swap them in, and check their gear. Most of the time this was a non-issue for me since I had a game plan and largely had my party built like I wanted, but the final chapter, yeah, not so much. I had to turn up the turbo speed in the final chapter to keep my sanity with this, since you have to backtrack really far to swap, and they kind of incentivize you to swap during that chapter as well, which just kind of sucks. Now, none of these issues really ruined the game for me though, and even in Chapter 8, there was a lot of cool stuff that happened in it, and in fairness, there's a little more going on in the dungeons in this game than in FC, and I still enjoyed the fights in them. Plus, the benefits of the party building for me far outweigh the tedium of actually swapping them out, and I still had a very, very fun time with this game. Trails in the Sky second chapter is one of the best RPG sequels I have ever played. Compared to some later Trails games, I was ready to say this one was about as flawed as last game, but after this replay, I was very pleasantly surprised. It is incredibly fun, and narratively, it is one that probably impacted me the most. I really don't think I'd be as big of a fan of the series as I am without this game. This is an RPG that managed to bring me to tears multiple times, featuring one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard in an RPG, and just had some really solid pacing. As I said, it isn't perfect. I was quite ready to grill this one in places, but I am quite happy this game was just as fun the second time as it was the first. This game is the most beloved title of the series, and I think most people will agree with that, and honestly, yeah, I see it. This one costs a little more than first chapter on Steam, but considering the game took around 70 hours to complete, I think it's absolutely worth the price of admission. I think first chapter is 100% required material for this though, but I don't personally see that as a problem. If you liked first chapter, I think you will love second chapter. I really hope I accurately communicated how much I love this game. It's my second favorite Trails game, and the fact that it rises above its flaws and the flaws of the first one so well is incredible. I think this is a fantastic game. One of the best games in the Trails series. I'm not really pushing against the grain on that one, but I can't recommend it enough. I think it is fantastic, and you guys should definitely play it. Regardless, we have one more game to look at, and this one is a weird one. It's Trails in the Sky, the third. Alright, that's going to be it once again. Just like last time, this one is a standalone release for all of you guys over here on YouTube, so you guys can just view it early while I work on the whole video, as it were. The next time around, when I finish the third review, that one will actually be the complete video. I will not be releasing third standalone. It will be the finished Trails in the Sky video, and I hope you guys will look forward to that. That said, we ran into a really funny situation when I was making this video, which is the fact that my friend Snive basically edited a bunch of AMV-like intros. I'm sure you guys have seen them already, and if you like them, feel free to leave a comment for my friend. But that said, he used the OVA version of the opening in his original version of it, and funny enough, the song by itself, the normal game song, does not get you copyright claimed, but apparently the OVA one does, which, go figure, the moment you do an anime thing, you get copyright claimed. And it's all actually the first time that I think I've gotten copyright claimed on my channel, at least, okay, no, that's not true. It is the first time I got copyright claimed from a review, which is kind of fun, because the moment I do something anime, that happens. Go figure. But yes, anyway, so that happened, and I did a poll, and everyone voted that I should basically just go ahead and edit over the original SC opening. So if that seemed a little weird timing-wise, that's actually why. I have in the description the original version of this video, if you guys do want to check that out. And that one will include the OVA one. It's going to be nice and copyright claimed. I won't earn anything from it. But that one exists for you guys because I really wanted people to experience that. I'm going to do the same thing with the trilogy video later on. I'm going to have 2 versions of this video in there, so you guys will be able to just kind of, you know, view the OVA opening song, as it were, as well. I'm also going to try and dispute it, though. Hey, maybe I'll get it out of copyright claim hell, but we'll see. In the meantime, though, I hope you guys did enjoy this video, and also you guys are probably noticing my hair is a lot shorter than the other clips. Go figure, that was recorded a while ago when I recorded the first chapter bit. So yeah, this is taking a while to get done, but I am trying to keep things visually consistent. So again, if I look different in ending scenes like this versus the actual video, that's why. I hope you guys understand. When the full videos are finished, it'll make perfect sense, but anyway, that is all aside the point. Again, though, I am excited also for Trails from Zero in September, but because of that game releasing in September, I'm actually going to try and jump right back into Third as soon as I can. I'm probably going to take a week off to do real life stuff, and I'm going to jump right back into playing Trails in the Sky the Third, recording all of that, and then getting into editing footage for all of that, and I am excited to replay that game in particular. Replaying FC actually did change my mind on a few things. I had a different version of the script that was actually shorter than what you saw, which is good that I replay because I had a whole lot more to say. Mostly positive, actually, because I had, like, I'd heard some friends say some negative things about SC. Despite how popular SC is, it is kind of an older one, but revisiting it, I didn't actually have that many issues with it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and so I got to actually revisit the script, change some things, and I think that was a lot of fun. I don't think I have the original version of the script available anymore, but it's based off my Steam review, which I think you guys can find somewhere, but that was a bit more me to the point, talking about how it's not a standalone experience, which makes sense for that sort of review, but not this kind of video. So yeah, anyway, a lot of changes under the hood, but I had fun making this video, and I think it was a lot of fun, and yeah, but anyway, I make the ending of this video drag on a bit too long. I just wanted to talk to you guys for a bit about this stuff. If you guys want to support me, I have a KoFi. You can check down below. I guess it's supposed to be pronounced coffee, but you guys know what I'm talking about when I say KoFi, so that's why I'm going with that. It's basically like Patreon. You can support me there. I don't earn much from these videos, so again, definitely check that out. That'll help out a lot, especially the art commissions. If you guys want to see Trails in the Sky characters drawn, I'm your guy. I know how to do that. I can definitely hit you up. So definitely check that out, and yeah, I'll help you out with that. Anyway, enough about that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you're looking forward to the Trails in the Sky trilogy video, the complete one when I get the 3rd section all nice and done. This one was also kind of a nightmare to edit. Camtasia was fighting me like crazy, so I may attempt to switch editors for the next video. We'll see. It's hard to learn a new video editor, so I may still power through with Camtasia for at least this video, but we'll see what happens. In the meantime, though, again, I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you later. Bye.